The cold came off the marble floors in waves, the way it always did in October, when the heating system in the old concert hall took its time waking up, and the building held the chill of the night before like a secret it was not ready to give up. Nina Ward was 7 years old, and she was dragging a mop bucket that was almost as tall as she was down the eastern corridor of Whitmore Hall, because her father had asked her to bring it around, and she had learned early that her father's requests were not really requests. Her name was Nina. That was the whole of it. No middle name. Her father, Owen Ward, had said once that one good name was enough for a person who intended to earn it. She had not known what that meant when she was small. By the time she was old enough to understand it, she had already started to believe it. Owen Ward had worked at Whitmore Hall for 11 years before Nina was born, and he had kept working there every year after. He mopped the floors and fixed the leaking pipes under the stage and carried chairs from the storage room when the orchestra needed extra seating for big performances. He knew every corner of that building the way a sailor knows the shape of the sea, not because it was beautiful, though it was, but because it was the place where he spent the hours of his life. Nina grew up in the building the way some children grow up in gardens or kitchens. She knew which door creaked. She knew that the fourth row of the upper balcony had a loose board, and that you had to step over it or it would make a sound like a gunshot in an empty hall. She knew that the Steinway on the main stage was never covered on Wednesdays, because that was the day the tuner came, and sometimes after the tuner left, the instrument sat there with its lid open and its keys bare, and the afternoon light from the high windows falling on it like something ceremonial. She touched it for the first time, on a Wednesday in October, the same month she turned 7. Owen was in the maintenance room 2 corridors away. She had left the mop bucket near the east door and walked onto the stage the way you walk into a room where you are not supposed to be, slowly, with your weight on the balls of your feet, as if the floor might give you away. The hall was empty. The seats stretched back in long dark rows, and the ceiling was so high above her that the chandeliers looked small. She had stood in this room 100 times to bring her father his lunch or to wait for him at the end of a shift, but she had never stood at the center of the stage before. The piano was to her left. She put her right hand on the keys first, just the tips of her fingers. The ivory was cool and smooth and slightly worn in the middle of each key, polished down by 1,000 hands before hers. She pressed one note. The sound filled the entire hall. She had not expected that. She had heard music come out of that instrument before, real music played by real musicians in rehearsals she had watched through the crack of the stage door. But the sound that one note made in that empty room was different from anything she had heard through a door. It did not just go out. It came back. It bounced off the back wall and the high ceiling and the wooden panels on either side, and it returned to her changed, bigger, warmer, like the room itself was answering. She pressed another note, then another. She did not know any songs. She did not know what chords were, or what keys, or what the words meant for any of it. She just pressed notes, the way a child presses things, to see what happens, to follow the sound somewhere. She had been sitting on the bench for about 4 minutes when Owen found her. He stood in the doorway at the back of the stage, with his work gloves still on his hands, and his expression very still. She saw him and went stiff with the particular fear of a child who has done something and knows it. She took her hands off the keys. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the piano. Then he walked across the stage, slowly, and he pulled one of the wooden chairs from the wall, and he set it next to the bench and he sat down. He said, "Play the ones that sound good together." That was all he said. She turned back to the keys. She started pressing notes again, and this time she listened for the ones that did not argue with each other, and she found some of them. And she played them in a row, and then she played them in pairs, and then she found a small pattern that went up, and then came back down, and felt like it was asking a question, and then answering it. She played that pattern over and over, changing small pieces of it each time. She played for 11 more minutes. Then a door opened somewhere at the back of the house, and a man's voice called out asking who was in the hall. Owen stood up immediately. He put the chair back against the wall. He took Nina by the hand and they walked off the stage together through the back door, and he picked up the mop bucket where she had left it near the east entrance, and they finished the corridor without speaking. She did not ask him if she could do it again. She did not need to. She already knew she would. The weeks after that first afternoon moved the way weeks do when a child has found a thing, slowly in the places where the thing is not present, and very fast in the moments when it is. Nina began to track the Wednesday schedule the way some children track the weather, watching for signs of what the afternoon would bring. Owen did not take her to the piano again, and he did not forbid it, which she understood to mean something precise about where the line was, and who was responsible for staying on the right side of it. She stayed on the right side of it for 3 more Wednesdays. On the 4th Wednesday, Owen had to stay late to fix a pipe under the rehearsal room, and he sent Nina to wait in the hall, because there was nothing else to do with her. The stage was empty. The lid of the Steinway was already open from the tuner's visit. She sat at the bench, and she played for 45 minutes. By then she had found several patterns that felt like they belonged together, and she had started to understand, without being told, without a teacher, without a single lesson, that the difference between noise and music was not the notes themselves but the space between them, that a sound needed silence around it to mean anything, that you could not make the music loud enough to matter by just pressing more keys harder. You made it matter by choosing when to stop. Owen found her at minute 43. He stood in the doorway again. He let her finish the pattern she was in the middle of. Then he said her name once, and she got up, and they left together. He said nothing about it that night. He said nothing about it the next day. He said nothing about it for 2 weeks, and then one evening after dinner he put a book on the kitchen table. It was a thin paperback with a blue cover, faded at the corners, and the title said, in small plain letters, Learning to Read Music. He did not look at her when he put it down. He picked up his coffee cup and went to sit in the other room. Nina picked up the book. She had it read, all 48 pages, by 10 o'clock that night. The thing about growing up in a building that holds music is that the music gets into you without asking permission. Nina heard the professional musicians rehearse through closed doors for years. She heard the way a phrase sounded when a trained musician played it, and she heard the same phrase the next day when she tried it herself, and she heard the difference clearly. She was not romantic about the gap. She knew the gap was large, but she also knew something that she could not have put into words at age 7 or age 8, or even age 10, which was that the gap was not the thing that mattered. The thing that mattered was that she kept moving across it. She had no formal lessons. Owen's salary covered the rent on their 2-room apartment and groceries, and the small emergencies that come with being alive and nothing else. She asked him once about lessons and he was quiet for a long time, and then he said he would think about it. He thought about it for 2 months, and then a woman named Carol Hines, who taught piano at the community center 2 streets over, agreed to take Nina on Saturday mornings in exchange for Owen repairing the broken steps on her front porch. It was not a trade, she announced. It was simply what happened, and Nina found out about it only when Carol told her years later. Carol was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, who had been teaching piano for 30 years and had stopped expecting surprises from her students, the way you stop expecting them when they have not arrived for long enough. Nina surprised her. Not in the first lesson, not even in the second, but somewhere around the 5th or 6th Saturday, Carol sat back in her chair and went quiet in the middle of Nina's practice piece, and stayed quiet for a while, and when she spoke again her voice was different. She said, "Who taught you the phrasing?" Nina said, "No one." Carol looked at her steadily. Then she gave her a harder piece. The years built themselves one on top of another. Nina went to school and came home and did her work, and on Wednesdays she went to the hall with her father, and on Saturdays she went to Carol, and in the evenings she sat at the small upright keyboard Owen had found at a garage sale. 49 keys, 2 of them sticky, the low end slightly flat, and she practiced until he told her it was time to sleep. The other children in her school were not interested in piano. They were not cruel about it. They were simply indifferent in the particular way that children are indifferent to things that do not belong to their world, and piano was not in their world. Nina did not mind. She had the hall and she had the keyboard, and she had the 48 pages she had read so many times the cover had separated from the binding. She minded other things. She minded the way that teachers at her school sometimes looked surprised when she answered a question correctly. She minded the way that Carol's neighborhood felt different from her own, the houses larger and quieter, the gardens trimmed. She minded the year Owen's back gave out, and he had to work half shifts for 3 months. And she watched him recalculate every evening what they could and could not afford in a given week. She minded all of this the way you mind something real. Not with drama, not with the feeling that the world owed her an apology, but with a clear, steady awareness that the conditions of her life were not the same as the conditions of other people's lives, and that this difference was not accidental. She put this awareness somewhere useful. She put it in her hands. By the time she was 14, Carol told her plainly that she had gone as far as she could take her. She said it without apology and without sentiment. She gave Nina the name of a professor at the regional conservatory, and she wrote a letter to go along with it. And the letter was, Nina discovered much later, 3 pages long, and left no room for doubt about what Carol thought she had been teaching on Saturday mornings for the past 7 years. The conservatory was across the city. The bus took 40 minutes each way. Owen adjusted his schedule so he could start his shift an hour earlier on Tuesdays and Thursdays, which were the days Nina had her lessons, so that he could be home when she got back. He never said this was what he was doing. She figured it out from the shift records she accidentally saw on the kitchen table one morning. She never said anything about it to him. He never said anything about it to her. Some things between them did not need to be said. This was one of them. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in February, when Nina was 15, on a day when the sky outside the kitchen window was the particular gray of a city winter that has gone on too long. It came in a white envelope with the Whitmore Hall crest on the upper left corner, the same crest she had seen on programs and posters her entire life. And it was addressed to Nina Ward, and it was not addressed to her father. She opened it standing at the kitchen counter before Owen came home from his morning shift. The Whitmore Hall Youth Concert Series was, as Nina already knew from years of watching its performances through whatever door was nearest, the most prestigious youth music platform in the region. Players were invited, not simply admitted. The concert was held in the main hall, on the main stage, with a full audience, and the kind of press attention that could change the direction of a young musician's path. The letter said she had been selected. She read it 3 times. Then she folded it along its original crease and put it on the table for Owen to see when he came home. He read it standing up, still in his coat, the same way she had read it. He put it back down on the table. He poured himself a glass of water. Then he said, in a voice that was careful and even, that they needed to make sure she had something appropriate to wear. That was the whole of his reaction. She understood it to be enormous. The weeks between the letter and the performance were the busiest of her life to that point. She was preparing the Chopin she had been building with her conservatory professor. A nocturne that required a kind of control she was still growing into. The emotional restraint of it harder for her than the technical parts. Because the technical parts you could practice until they were right, but restraint required something different. It required the decision, each time, to hold back what you were feeling and let the music speak instead of you. She worked on this every day. She worked on it until the decision stopped feeling like a decision and started feeling like instinct. The evening of the performance arrived cold and clear, the kind of night when the city feels sharper than usual, the lights more defined, the sounds of the street more distinct. Nina rode the bus to Whitmore Hall with her music folder on her lap and her good shoes in a bag, because the soles were thin and she did not want to wear them down on the pavement. She had pressed her dress the night before. It was deep blue, bought with 3 weeks of tutoring money she had saved from helping 2 students at school with their arithmetic, and it fit her correctly, and it was the right kind of dress for the occasion. Owen could not be there in the audience. He had been called in for an evening shift to cover for a colleague who was unwell, and he had accepted the shift before Nina's performance date was confirmed, and by the time the conflict was clear, it was too late to give the shift back without consequence. He told her this with his face arranged into the expression he used when he was being matter-of-fact about something he did not like. She told him it was fine, it was not fine. But it was the reality of how their life was constructed, and she had long since learned that the truth of a thing, and whether you could change it, were 2 separate questions, and she only had energy to work on the second one. She arrived at the hall 90 minutes before her performance slot. She signed in at the artist's entrance. She found the green room, which was a room she had never been inside before despite knowing its location from the other side of the wall, and she sat in one of the chairs and went through her piece in her mind, measure by measure, the way her professor had taught her to do when a physical instrument was not available. The other young musicians in the green room were talking to each other with the ease of people who had been in rooms like this before. Two of them were discussing a summer program that Nina had heard of, and had not applied to because the application required a travel deposit she did not have. One was eating something his mother had packed for him in a small glass container. Their parents were, most of them, in the hall already, having come early to secure good seats. Nina sat with her hands resting on her knees, and her eyes on the middle distance, and she thought about the Chopin. At 1 hour before her scheduled performance, a man came to the green room door. She recognized him. His name was Leonard Fry. He was the hall's program director, a position that meant he was responsible for the shape of every event that happened on that stage. She had seen him many times over the years, moving through the building with the particular purposefulness of someone whose decisions cost money. He had never spoken to her directly. She was the janitor's daughter. Their paths had not crossed in the way that required speech. He came to the green room door and he scanned the room, and his eyes found her, and he came over. He crouched slightly so that he was closer to her eye level. His expression was something she would later describe, to the single person she ever told this story to, as apologetic in the way that makes apology worse. He told her there had been a problem with the roster. He said it quietly and carefully, the way you say something that you have rehearsed saying. He said the slot had been double booked, through an administrative error, and that the other student, he gestured vaguely toward the corridor, had a prior claim on it. He said they would certainly be in touch about future series. He said he was very sorry for the confusion. She looked at him while he was talking. She looked at his face. She understood every word he was saying, and she understood every word he was not saying. The administrative error had not been an error. It was a decision. And the decision had been made after someone had looked at the registration form and seen Owen Ward listed as her parent, and the address of their apartment listed as her address, and had made the arithmetic that people in positions like Leonard Fry's sometimes make, the arithmetic that is never written down, and never admitted, and never has to be, because it happens in the space between what is said and what is done. She did not say this. She said, "Okay." She said it in a clear, even voice. She stood up and picked up her music folder and her bag, with her good shoes inside it. She thanked Leonard Fry for letting her know. She walked out of the green room and down the corridor. She walked past the stage door. Through the small window set into it, she could see the stage, lit and waiting, the Steinway at its center. She walked past it. She walked down the corridor that led to the maintenance level, the level she knew better than any other part of the building, the route her feet had taken more times than she could count. She pushed open the heavy door at the end, and she walked through it into the familiar corridor that smelled of cleaning solution, and pipe metal, and the particular dust of a very old building. She sat on a crate in the maintenance corridor for 4 minutes. She did not move. She did not make any sound. She looked at a point on the far wall. Then she got up. She picked up her music folder. She went through the side door that led back to the main lobby. The lobby was filling with the performance's audience, people in good coats talking to each other, programs in their hands. She walked through the lobby without looking at anyone, and she pushed through the front door, and she walked down the stone steps, and she turned left, and she walked to the bus stop, and she got on the bus, and she went home. Owen was not there. She hung up her blue dress on the hook on the back of her door. She made a cup of tea. She sat at the kitchen table with it, and she thought about the Chopin, the thing she had not played tonight, the piece she had built measure by measure for 3 months. She thought about the measures that had been hardest, the ones that required restraint, the ones where the whole point was to hold back what you were feeling and let the music do it instead. She thought about how useful that lesson had turned out to be. She did not tell anyone for a long time. Not her professor. Not Carol, who had retired by then and moved away. Not Owen. She filed it in the same place she filed all the other arithmetic, the invisible accounting of being who she was in the spaces she was moving through. And she put her hands on the keyboard the next morning, and she kept working. The years that followed were not a straight line. No years are, but these less than most. She won a regional competition at 16, which paid for new sheet music and nothing else. She placed second at a national youth competition at 17, which was enough to get her a scholarship offer from a music college, 4 hours from home. She stayed. Her professor, a man named Arthur Cole, was not happy about this, and he told her plainly that staying was costing her. She told him she was aware of that. He looked at her for a long moment, and then he went back to work. She stayed, because Owen's back had gotten worse that year. She stayed because some accounting that lived deeper than ambition told her that this was not the right moment to go. She applied for every scholarship the conservatory listed. She tutored. She taught beginner piano to 4 children on Saturday mornings in the community center room where Carol had once taught her. And she used the money to pay for her own advanced study. And she never once thought of this as a contradiction, because it was not a contradiction. It was the math of getting somewhere from where she was. She turned 18, 19, 20. She entered competitions with names long enough to fill 3 lines on a page, and she did well enough in them that people started to know her name in the specific circles where her name was useful to be known. She played in recitals and chamber performances, and small concert venues, and she played in the back rooms of restaurants for private events twice when the money was short. And she was good in all of these places. Genuinely good. But good in the way of someone who is still building towards something larger than any room they have yet been in. Arthur Cole pushed her constantly. He was a difficult man, precise in his criticism, and not given to warmth, and he had high standards that he applied to everyone, with the same indifferent pressure. Nina found him useful exactly because of this. She did not need someone to tell her she was talented. She needed someone to tell her what was still wrong. There was always something still wrong. She worked on it. The piano she had at home by this point was a full upright, second hand from a music school that had replaced it, with all 88 keys in working condition, and a sound that was not beautiful but was honest. She played on it for 4 to 6 hours every day. Owen, whose back limited him now to lighter duties at the hall, had long since stopped commenting on the hours she kept. The sound of the piano was the sound of their apartment. It had been for years. He worked around it the way you work around weather. He attended every performance she gave in the city. Every one, without exception. He sat in the audience in his good clothes, a navy jacket he had owned for 15 years that still fit him correctly. And he listened. He did not tell her which parts he liked, or what he had felt during them. After the performances he would find her, and he would say something brief, a sentence or two, and what he said was always accurate, and sometimes unexpected, and never sentimental, and she valued his opinion more than she valued most of the critics who wrote about her later. The first time a national music publication mentioned her name, she brought the article home and left it on the kitchen table without comment. Owen read it. He put it back down. He said, "They spelled your name right." She laughed. It was one of maybe 5 times she had laughed in the kitchen, in the context of her music, and she remembered all of them. At 22, she entered the Carver International Piano Competition. The Carver was not the largest competition of its kind in the world, but it was large enough, and its reputation was the kind that moved careers forward in ways that were not easily manufactured otherwise. The application was thorough, and required 3 recordings and 2 written references, and an entry fee that Nina paid in 2 installments. Arthur Cole wrote one of the references. He did not show it to her, and she did not ask. She prepared 3 pieces: the Ravel she had been living with for 2 years, a Bach partita that required a different kind of intelligence entirely, and a contemporary composition by a living Czech composer that not many competition pianists chose because it was unusual, and judges could be conservative. She chose it because it was the right piece, and she had learned to trust that judgment. She went to the Carver in April of that year. She did not win the first round. She went home. She identified the 4 measures where her timing had drifted. She corrected them. She returned for the second round, which had a different application process for those who had not advanced directly. And she moved through the second round with a score that placed her in the top 9 competitors in her category. She came 3rd overall. 3rd was not first, but 3rd at the Carver, at 22. With no family money and no institutional connections and no conservatory degree from the kind of school whose name people recognized immediately, was the kind of 3rd that Arthur Cole looked at and said, without any emotion at all, that she should apply to the Whitmore Hall Autumn Gala. She went very still when he said it. She said, "Whitmore Hall." He said yes. She looked at the window for a moment. Then she looked back at him. She said, "All right." She said it the same way she had said okay to Leonard Fry 7 years before, with the same even voice. But the words meant something entirely different now. Okay had been the sound of the door closing. All right was the sound of a door she intended to walk through. She sent the application in March. The night of the Whitmore Hall Autumn Gala arrived the way important nights arrive, ordinary until they are not. Nina took the bus across the city. She had her music folder. She had her good shoes. She had a different dress this time, dark green, bought with money she had earned, and did not have to count twice. She arrived at the artist's entrance. The security guard checked her name on the list and found it and waved her through. She walked down the corridor she had walked down 1,000 times from the other side, the maintenance side, and it looked different from this direction. The walls were the same. The smell was almost the same, but the direction of her movement through it was entirely new. The green room was fuller than she remembered. More performers this year, more names on the program. She found a chair in the corner and she sat, and she went through her pieces in her mind, the way she always did, measure by measure. The Ravel first because it was the opener, and it needed the most attention. The Maestro arrived 20 minutes after she did. His name was Jeffrey Holt. He was 63 years old, and he had been a professional pianist for 40 of those years. And he had performed on stages that made Whitmore Hall look modest, though he did not behave as though he knew this. He was a tall man with good posture and gray hair, and a reputation that entered rooms before he did. He had performed at this gala 5 times before. He was the headline act. He came into the green room and spoke to several people he knew, which was most of them. And he poured himself a glass of water from the table at the side. And he noticed Nina in the corner because she was sitting still while everyone else was moving, and he came over. He asked if she was performing tonight. She said yes. He asked what she was playing. She told him. He raised an eyebrow at the Czech composer's name. He asked if she found it difficult. She said she had found it difficult when she started working on it. She said she did not find it difficult now. He looked at her with the particular attention of a man who has been around music long enough to hear things and how people talk about it. He said he looked forward to hearing her play. She said she looked forward to hearing him as well. He smiled at that, briefly, and went back to the other side of the room. She returned to the Ravel in her mind. Jeffrey Holt performed first. He was masterful in the way that 40 years of mastery sounds. Clean, authoritative, technically without flaw. The phrasing schooled and correct, and deeply considered. The audience responded as audiences respond to mastery, with appreciation, with respect, with the particular quality of attention that serious music commands. He was applauded well and at length. Then Nina walked out. She had been in this room before, not like this, not from the stage entrance, not with her name in the program, not with 400 people in the seats, but she had been in this room. She had touched the keys of this instrument, or one exactly like it, in this room, while her father mopped the corridors outside. She had played for 11 minutes at age 7 in the empty dark of it, and heard the sound come back to her from the walls. She sat down at the bench. She played the Ravel. The thing about the Ravel she had chosen, the Gaspard de la Nuit, which is among the most demanding piano works ever written, which is not performed by young pianists in competition contexts except by those who have a very clear idea of what they are doing, is that it sounds, in the wrong hands, like a series of technical problems being solved. In the right hands, it sounds like something that was always supposed to exist, and has simply now arrived. She played it in the second way. She did not think about the hall while she was playing. She did not think about Leonard Fry, or the green room at 15, or the maintenance corridor, or Owen's navy jacket in the audience. She thought about the music. She thought about what it required, and she gave it what it required. And she held back where holding back was the instruction, and she pressed forward where the piece needed weight. And the room around her went from the ordinary quiet of an audience, paying attention to something different, something rarer, a kind of listening that is closer to held breath. At the end of the second movement, in the stretch before she began the third, she heard nothing. Not polite silence, not patience, nothing, The entire hall had stopped making the small sounds that 400 people always make, and it was simply still. She played the third movement into that stillness. When she finished, there was a half-second of total quiet. She stood and she acknowledged the audience, and she walked off stage, and she went directly to the maintenance corridor, the route her feet knew before her mind did, and she stood in the familiar smell of it for 2 minutes. Then she went back to the green room, and she drank a glass of water, and she sat down. Jeffrey Holt came to find her after the final applause had settled. He stood in the green room doorway and he looked at her for a moment before he spoke. He said, in a voice that was quiet and precise and without any performance in it, that he had been playing piano for 40 years, and that what he had heard tonight had changed what he thought was possible for this music. She thanked him. He asked where she had studied. She told him. She told him the conservatory name, the professor's name, the community center where she had taken her first lessons on Saturday mornings. She told him without apology, because there was nothing to apologize for. He nodded slowly. He asked if she had performed here before. She said, "Not exactly." He waited to see if she would say more. She did not. He did not push. Some things, she had learned, did not need to be said. This was one of them. She found Owen in the maintenance corridor after. He was in his work clothes, because he had been on shift all evening, the same as he had been on shift the night she was 15, and had sat in the green room preparing a piece she would never perform. He was holding a program. It was folded along a crease that was already permanent. Her name was in it, fourth in the second column, and it was her name only, just as the letter had been addressed to her name only, and the crease in the program meant he was keeping it the same way she knew, without asking, that he had kept every program from every performance he had attended in the navy jacket. She looked at the program. She looked at him. He said nothing. She said nothing. Then he folded the program again, carefully, along the existing crease, and put it in the inside pocket of his work jacket. She thought about everything the building had given her, the sound that came back from the walls at age 7, the Wednesday afternoons, the thin blue book with the cover separated from the binding, the route she had walked 1,000 times in both directions. She thought about how a place could hold you before you were ready to hold yourself. Then she walked through the lobby with its marble floors and its chandelier light, and its low hum of the evening's last conversations, and she pushed through the front door, and she walked down the stone steps. The Steinway was behind her, lid down for the night, keys covered, the hall going quiet around it. She did not look back. She had gotten everything she came for.